This is a Fox News alert. Tonight, the crisis in the Middle East intensifies. Israel offers a 24-hour ceasefire, but says it will continue to demolish Hamas military tunnels. Hamas rejected that offer. And our embassy in Tripoli evacuated as the U.S. tells Americans to get out of Libya. More on both breaking stories, but first to My Open. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us. Tonight, Christians in the Middle East marked for death because of their faith, and no one is fighting for them. As Christians are slaughtered, churches torched, and families forced from their homeland, the mass murder of Christians is underway. While Israeli Jews are under similar attack, at least they have Netanyahu, a leader who is willing to fight to the death. So who should be defending Christians? Who? The leader of the Catholic Church, the Pope, the man who shepherds the faithful. Now, it may seem to you that the destruction of biblical antiquities, the looting of churches, and the persecution of Christians are a half a globe away. It's someone else's problem. After all, you're safe. You live in the United States of America. But you need to worry. A reverse crusade is already underway, and some of those extremists are already in the United States. ISIS, the radicalized Muslim group that already has created a caliphate in Syria, Iraq, and the border of Jordan, a nation described not by nationality but by religion, issued an ultimatum to Christians to leave their homeland, convert to Islam, or die by the sword. They spray paint the homes of Christians to identify those who must convert, leave, or die. And as ISIS, no stranger to technology, posts pictures of Christians crucified, their intent to purge Christians from the Middle East is unquestioned. And while I'm on the subject of who should be defending Christians, I might add that we are a nation founded on the Judeo-Christian ethic, as evidenced by our founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, so we should be doing something. Why has the Obama administration's foreign policy ignored the killing of Christians in the Middle East? Why has he provided funding to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt when the Egyptians themselves wanted the Brotherhood out because of their intolerance of other religions? And while Iran's supreme leader promises a world free of infidels and the flag of Islam in all four corners of the world, our president negotiates for Iran's nuclear enrichment. But now to the papacy. I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. My children are baptized. And I mean no disrespect. But it is time for the papacy, and Pope Francis in particular, to start protecting his Christian flock. This month, Pope Francis preached that immigrant children in facilities around the United States should be welcomed and protected. Your Holiness, they're in the United States. They are protected. They are being given food and clothing and shelter. No children are being killed by the United States, but Christian children are being killed in the Middle East. And while we appreciate your prayer for those in the Middle East last week, it's just not enough. Everything about who we are, evidence of from whence we came as Christians, is being destroyed. They are taking crosses off churches and turning them into mosques with loudspeakers. Priceless relics are being destroyed or sold. And for the first time in 1,600 years, Mass will not be held in the ancient city of Mosul, Iraq. The language of Jesus, Aramaic, could be lost as well as Christians who speak it are murdered. Your Holiness, you are the leader of the flock. You control one of the wealthiest organizations in the world. And with wealth comes power. Your recent trips and your planned trips do not reflect the urgent concern necessary for Christians in Iraq and Syria and Egypt. Your pronouncements span the globe. They are repeated in hundreds of thousands of churches throughout the world to millions of parishioners. Every church in the world should be repeating a strong, urgent message from the papacy condemning this slaughter and calling for the world to stop the annihilation of the innocents instead of worrying about immigrant children already protected by America. As a brutal band of jihadists attempt to remove all evidence of Christianity and destroy biblical tombs like that of Jonah, you must act. Your Holiness, the papacy was silent during World War II. You cannot afford to let history repeat itself. And Your Holiness, the papacy also lagged behind the sex abuse scandal. I know. I drafted the first grand jury report detailing the movement of pedophile priests in the nation. It is time for the papacy to get out in front of this Christian massacre. You have incredible power. The Vatican is a country with ambassadors and a secret service. You can put political pressure on nations. You can provide sanctuary. You have resources for humanitarian aid. But most of all, you have the power of the pulpit. You have the power to change the world. Turn the other cheek does not mean that you cannot respond. It does not mean that you cannot provide humanitarian aid. Turn the other cheek does not mean that the most you can offer is a prayer. It does not mean that you cannot go to Iraq and give those Christians who are marked for certain death, willing to die because of their belief in Jesus, some consolation before their inevitable end. And that's my open. And with me now, in defense of Christians, senior advisor and documentary filmmaker, Jordan Alette. All right, good evening, Jordan. You've returned from Iraq, Syria, Turkey. You've seen firsthand the slaughter of Christians in the Middle East. What is going on there?
Well, thank you, Judge, for having me on and highlighting this very important issue. I think what's going on there is nothing short of a religious cleansing, sort of like the ethnic cleansing that took place in Bosnia years ago. And it's a very important time. We met with Christians, like you said, in Syria, Iraq, refugee camps in Lebanon, in Egypt, Coptic Christians there. And over again, like you said, they asked us the same question, and we didn't really have a very good answer for it. And that was, what is the West doing? What is the U.S. government doing? What are Americans doing to support the beleaguered Christian church in the Middle East? And again, like I said, we didn't have a very good answer for that question, because I think first and foremost, whether it's religious leaders, as you mentioned, or elected officials, they don't move unless people are aware and put pressure on them. And that's what our organization, In Defense of Christians, is trying to do. It's trying to educate people, trying to unify Christians, trying to make people aware, first and foremost, that there are Christians in the Middle East. Because let's be honest, I don't think most Americans even realize that there are large communities of Christians that have existed there for 2,000 years.
It's interesting that, 10% of the Coptic Christians, or of Egypt, is made up of Coptic Christians. But all indications are that ISIS is responsible for this. Now, we know that they are this radical Islamist group. Who are they, and how are they being funded?
Well, most likely they're being funded by Saudi Arabia and some of these radical groups there. But obviously their goal is, like I said, a religious cleansing, to get rid of all, not only Christians, but anything, like you mentioned, having to do with Christianity, whether it's the churches, the crosses, and they want to make it sort of one big Saudi Arabia. And that's not only a negative thing for the Christians there, but that's a very bad thing for the world in general. And
they're talking about doing it not just in the Middle East. Am I correct about that?
Well, I think it would be naive to assume that they would stop with just Iraq and Syria and some of these other countries. I'm sure there's a bigger plan there. And if we think that they would stop at that point, like I said, I think we'd be very naive.
All right. And you believe that the forces eradicating Christians in the Middle East are the same forces that took down the World Trade Center. Why do you say that? And I assume that you're saying that there is a national security interest in this issue for the United States.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there are definite ties there. some of the same funding sources, like I said, that were involved with Al-Qaeda. And as we know, ISIS is actually in a more extreme group than Al-Qaeda. Right. And so, you know, you have to be aware of that. We have to be knowledgeable about that fact. But like I said, we need to make sure that we stand for the Christians there, because when Christians are in these communities, there's a real difference. Like the Coptic Christians, who make up 10% of the population in Egypt, a lot of times they influence poor Muslims, Muslims in general, in the institutions, whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, and they have a real effect, because Muslims who are brought up in a Christian school or have Christian neighbors and friends are a lot less likely to be radicalized than those that are brought up in a totally sort of extremist environment.
And Jordan, what we do know is that from what happened in Egypt, that a lot of the Muslims were taking Christians into their mosques to assist them, and Christians were helping Muslims. So it's as though, you know, at a certain level, at a human-to-human level, people can live together as they have for centuries, but it's at the top where this hate and this, you know, this vitriol and violence is coming down. But what happens if Christians are forced out of the Middle East?
Well, like I said, each generation is likely to be much more radicalized. And I just want to give you a quick story from, we were able to get into Syria through the border from Turkey, and we met with an evangelical pastor, and he and his congregation actually were helping the Muslims who had come from different parts of the country. And like I said, they're a lot less likely to be radicalized because of that personal connection, that personal relationship that they had established with Christians in the area.
Well, let's hope that, you know, the world does get involved. And Jordan, I know you've done documentaries on this issue. We thank you very much for being with us tonight.
All right. Thank you for having me.
And coming up, Ambassador John Bolton on the demise of Christianity in the Middle East. Stay with us.